for the news.
All right. Again, want to welcome DJ to the show. So we had mentioned earlier the Center for Inquiry again, so you can give us an overview of the organization, what you do for them, and just start from there.
Okay, the Center for Inquiry, as both of you know, and the viewers I'm sure might not know, being here in Austin, the Center for Inquiry is a network of critical hubs for rationality in our society. So in North America, there are 4 branches. We have offices in Rockefeller Center, in Florida, in Hollywood, California, and in upstate New York, adjacent to the State University of New York. And the Center for Inquiry is best conceived of as kind of a headquarters of a number of different programs and organizations of public education and advocacy, all committed to defending and promoting reason and science in society. Okay. Specifically, each one of those organizations headquartered at the Center for Inquiry have their own missions too. So at Center for Inquiry is headquartered the Council for Secular Humanism, publishes the magazine Free Inquiry. Right. Free Inquiry is the leading magazine for the secular ethical point of view in our society, the non-religious, the atheistic ethical point of view. Yeah. And so this is Free Inquiry.
Yeah, and this most recent one.
Yeah.
And that's commonly available too, which is good.
Yeah, now you'll notice the cover story is a little controversial. It's the Great Scandal, Christianity's Role in Nazism. This is an underreported story, and it's the kind of message that Free Inquiry and the Council for Secular Humanism treat, which is really advancing the non-religious point of view in our society, because there are so many voices. There's a cacophony of religious extremists and liberal religionists and supernatural and paranormal voices. Free Inquiry tries to offer a rejoinder to that by offering a reasonable response to those purveyors of, right, I'd call it uncharitably nonsense.
Hey,
another organization headquartered at the Center for Inquiry is SciCop. It's the Committee for the Scientific Investigation of Claims of the Paranormal, right, which is a worldwide organization devoted to applying science and reason to claims of the supernatural and paranormal. So the paranormal is any claim that says that something's happening that science can't prove. So right, psychics and cryptozoology like Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster, and UFOs and past life regression, any of the supernatural claims that don't specifically have to do with religion. So Council for Secular Humanism treats religion in our society and secular ethics and the role of reason applied to ethics. SciCop publishes Skeptical Inquirer magazine, and this treats the paranormal. Some of the leading minds of the day have been involved in these 2 organizations headquartered at the Center for Inquiry, such as Carl Sagan, Richard Dawkins, right, Stephen Jay Gould, Wendy Kaminer, on and on. A lot of people who are interested in advancing the scientific naturalist point of view.
Right.
By scientific naturalism, I mean the outlook that is a result from having a commitment to the methods and the implications of science. Other organizations headquartered at the Center for Inquiry are the Campus Free Thought Alliance. We run a secular Islam outreach program called the Institute for the Secularization of Islamic Societies. It's kind of a contradiction there for you to think of secular Muslims, but the analogy would be secular Jews, non-religious, right, Jewish people or non-religious Catholics. You know, they're culturally Catholic,
brought up in that culture,
but they're now non-believers, and they're working for church-state or let's say mosque-state separation in those societies. It's interesting that Bush is all for the separation of mosque and state when it comes to Islamic societies, but not so when it comes to American society.
Exactly. So what was the impetus behind, I guess, not just the growth and the development of CFI and its various affiliate organizations, and what sort of fights are you engaged in at this time? Like I know that you mentioned something about movements on campus.
Right.
And but just through the mass media and through just like dialogue through other channels to get the message out. What What various things are you focused on as an organization at this time, specifically?
If you look at mass media and popular culture, there are a lot of purveyors of irrationalism. There are a lot of people hawking irrational belief systems, whether it's extremist religious points of view that call for jihads or holy wars or crusades, or it's New Age movements that say you don't need medical doctors to intervene when there are health problems, but you instead align chakras, or you charge up crystals, or you wear certain trinkets around your wrist and that heals you.
Or you just pray. And,
or pray,
Just keep praying unless you happen to die while you're praying. But
all of these purveyors of nonsense in our society are really the focus of the different organizations at the Center for Inquiry. But more than that, we're offering and we advance alternatives. So we're not just working to rip the rugs out from under people, but to let them know that, let's carry the metaphor, that the rug they're standing on is not too substantial, but that there's something a little more substantial for them to concentrate on, and that's the scientific outlook, scientific naturalism.
Yeah, that's an excellent point that I want to reiterate too, because quite often, and yours is not a strictly atheist organization, but atheist organizations quite often take a lot of criticism for the fact that it seems to be all, oh, well, you guys are just complaining, and so you're out to attack.
Just a bunch of curmudgeons who have been burned by religion or something.
And not offering positive alternatives. And of course, like ACA as an organization, through promoting what we call positive atheism, we do try to do that sort of thing. Like we had. Like a lot of the rallies that we have are actually motivated by positive messages as opposed to attacks, unless of course there's something to protest.
So you're advancing a certain ethical ideal. You're not just carping against some supernatural or paranormal belief system.
Yeah, not just saying, oh, we don't want this. It's like, oh, here's something that we think works better. And for example, like one of our rallies was a celebration of church-state separation about in January 2002. We did something for the anniversary of Thomas Jefferson's letter to the Danbury Baptists, where he coined the term wall of separation. And we have also, we had our own memorial for the 9/11 victims, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that is something very important for organizations to focus on. Tell me, what are some of the what are some of the memes, or what are some of the preconceived notions and some of the rhetoric that these purveyors of irrationalism, whether it's the Christian right or what have you, what exactly is their push? Exactly how are they mounting their attacks, and what sort of rhetoric are they presenting to their followers to get them to where we see this attitude like we have right now in our culture of ultra-religious conservatism. We have a general who can actually get in front of a group of people and say Satan's our enemy and be taken seriously.
And get away with that, and be believed.
And the Boy Scouts of America, you see these kinds of. So exactly how is the religious right defending its position to its followers to get them all rallied up?
Well, I'll talk a little about the religious right, and in fact there are so many purveyors of nonsense in our society that to list them all would be 10 shows. Right. So let's concentrate on just two areas that we focus on. One is what some people would call postmodernism. So in higher education today there are educators, philosophers, professors in the humanities who will defend the position that any worldview and any idea is just as good as any other idea. Right. And in that way, they've become weirdly allied with religious political extremists like those evangelicals on the far right who are advancing that only their one view is the right view. So on the campuses you have postmodernists who defend the teaching of creationism or intelligent design because their belief is that science and that the theory of evolution is just one mythic narrative among many others. So that's postmodernism, and that's where we give a lot of attention to, kind of defending the Enlightenment ideals of reason and science and the capacity of people to be rational and to discover and to find out small case T truth about matters. Now another purveyor of nonsense, you're asking the rhetoric that they use. Let's talk a little about evangelical Christianity, or more generally, religious political extremists.
Right.
In America,
and we always have to take great care to make sure that we are not just stereotyping everyone into one little cube.
I'm glad you said that, because it's
that's another thing we can get accused of.
We share an ideal of a robust freedom of conscience. We believe that as Americans, we have a right to believe whatever we want to believe. If I want to believe in two gods or one God or no God, I have that right. The problem comes in when a person's private religious belief becomes politicized and advanced in the public arena to limit another person's civil liberties. So one of these movements,
one belief system is favored over others.
Right.
And
advanced institutionally or by the government, yeah, that's a problem.
Right.
So one of these groups on campuses and in society at large right now, we call the Mind Siege movement. There's an author named Tim LaHaye. I'm sure many of you might have heard of Tim LaHaye. He's the author of the single best-selling series in publishing history. It's called the Left Behind book series, about what happens at the end of the world when Jesus comes back, the apocalypse, skin melts off faces, people are driving in their cars and they vanish. And so it's that storyline.
Sounds so appealing.
More books have sold in that series than any other series in publishing history, more than Harry Potter, more than anything else. Well, this fella, Tim LaHaye, who has a long history in the far-right movement, I wouldn't exactly say the conservative intellectual movement, but the culturally conservative movement. This Tim LaHaye co-authored a book with a evangelical intellectual named David Noble a couple of years ago. It was a New York Times best-selling book called Mind Siege, subtitled The Battle for Truth in the New Millennium.
So it's interesting their use of language.
Right.
They're masters of that sort of rhetoric.
On the far right, for instance, there's no estate tax. It's called the death tax. It's called the marriage penalty. It's not called tax benefits for being single. So you're right. It's very skillful use of language. Would make Goebbels proud. Maybe I shouldn't have said that.
Well, they say it about our side. So,
right. So they co-authored this book, Mind Siege, Battle for Truth in the New Millennium. And this book makes the claim that the universities especially, society at large, but the universities, are dominated by something we call secular humanism. By secular humanism, they're attacking the publisher of this magazine, Free Inquiry, the Council for Secular Humanism. So they argue that secular humanism is the single greatest threat to the survival of the American way of life. And moreover, they have a very sophisticated kind of nuanced argument. They say not only is it a threat, but that it's a religion, and therefore it's unconstitutional to teach evolution, sex ed, the other doctrines of the religion of secular humanism. I mean, specious argument doesn't hold water, but it's getting some action out
propaganda,
there.
Right?
I can't even comprehend how they actually consider some of that stuff. I mean, if you can actually go out and rap on a tree or something, then it's physically there. You can't teach that, trees don't really exist. We're not going to teach about them. So much of the stuff in the sciences, at least, I mean, I can understand how they say, we're not going to teach, certain things. That's fine. But when you start getting down to hard sciences, how can you say that we can't teach biology?
Well, this I think is where this whole idea of postmodernism comes in, and this is where they co-opt the language of the postmodernists when it is to their advantage to do so. When it becomes this idea of this idea is no better or just as good as any other, et cetera, et cetera. So you should teach ours because that's fair.
And the evangelicals assume that because we don't believe in a God or a supernatural or the paranormal, that we're necessarily postmodernist or culturally relativistic, that we don't believe in objective moral facts or objective truth claims about biology or physics or astrophysics.
So it's just incredibly skillful or propagandistic language that they're able to use. In other words, so it's not that. To their followers, it's not, the reason, evolution is taught in schools is not because it is, the best supported valid scientific theory about biology, but because
there's a cabal of humanists advancing a certain secret religion.
It's like this paranoid conspiracy theory where, the secret, society of, ring knockers is in charge, and they are.
That's the craziest thing, to my way of thinking, of Tim LaHaye's personal narrative. I mean, Tim LaHaye and others of his ilk have actually engaged in Illuminati conspiracy theories. Pat Roberts and others, I can't remember the specifics, but thinkers on the far right have advanced notions that that there's 12 Jews in Antarctica with a weather machine that are deciding natural disasters to benefit them economically.
Yeah, I think Art Bell had something about that.
So,
it's really
so
really
the
nuts.
conspiracy theory that there's a small group of secular humanists in control of the country isn't very far removed from the old conspiracy theories of the Illuminati and things like that.
Right. Wow. Okay. Well, we're going to take a couple calls and then keep talking. One thing that I noticed was interesting was that today you spoke to our group. We had an unusual mid-month lecture,
right?
And you presented some video that Tim LaHaye and the Mind Siege, this whole sort of the movement, but specifically, I mean, how would you refer to it? It involves the same kind of rhetoric I've noticed that you usually use in a wartime scenario, which involves, for example, dehumanizing the enemy.
Right, right.
Well, what they do is they build
liken
up,
us to Nazis.
Yeah, they build up secular humanism as this boogeyman, and I also noticed that they always, and I thought this was kind of particularly offensive, was that they refer to themselves. Whenever they talk to themselves, they use the term pro-moral.
Right.
And
in
with
fact,
the implication being that if you aren't on their side, you must be
anti-morality.
Yeah.
And this is, in fact, a brilliant strategy among those organizers. No longer are they only reaching out to other evangelical Christians, but to any pro-moral American who disagrees with, what Michael Newdow did, or looks around and sees, oh, there's violence on the streets. There's a lot of sex and violence on TV. There has to be an explanation. Oh, the easiest explanation, the simplest, the fastest, is that there's a cabal of secular humanists orchestrating it all.
Yeah.
They do use the term pro-moral American as if we're anti-moral, but I'll tell you something. One of these, I had a radio debate with David Noble, one of the authors of this book.
Right.
And we had a special call-in where Paul Kurtz, the founder of all of these organizations, a retired professor of philosophy at State University of New York, he called in as a guest on the show when I'm debating with David Noble on secular humanism and church-state separation. And David Noble began, he was kind of a little flustered with niceties to Paul Kurtz, and he said, Paul, you know what, I was just reading through Humanist Manifesto 2, which Paul Kurtz authored in 1973. He said, I agree with almost everything you say. Morally, I agree with all of it. I just don't agree with a couple points. And Paul Kurtz wasn't baited by that. Paul Kurtz instead said, David, I'm alarmed that you impugn so many good, moral, non-religious Americans. Why would you do that? And there was a pause, there was dead air. And that's the point. He's impugning the goodness of many non-religious people by vilifying them, like you said.
Exactly.
He has to make,
because they want to
make us unhuman, bad, or evil, deceived by Satan, as you saw in this video
because they want
series.
to redefine morals in such a way as to place their particular belief system and their particular political, politically motivated belief systems at the center of it.
Right. Well, you remember from this morning when I gave the talk to ACA, the book Mind Siege had 220,000 copies now have been distributed. A lot are distributed on the campuses. Another book, Clergy in the Classroom, a textbook on against secular humanism and secular ethics. What's most alarming is that they've prepared a 6-part video training series for evangelical Christians that they've sent out to thousands of churches across the country to, in their words, mobilize Christian foot soldiers to take back the country from the godless and immoral.
Wow. The paranoia here is amazing.
Yeah.
This is like these, when they say they're training Christian foot soldiers with these videos, it kind of makes me think of those Al-Qaeda videos.
Right.
Now, they're not quite getting into physical terrorism.
Obviously, they don't use the same strategy as those other religious political extremists, but they are all religious political extremists.
Yeah,
They're all seeking politically to advance a personal religious belief.
And a lot of it is sort of based on, I think, they perceive that they have a power base that is being threatened, and they want to shore that power base up. And then it also seems like ultimately it really is down to fundraising, right? I mean, they want to use as much emotional rhetoric as they can. And I was watching some of these video clips you showed this morning, and I was just picking out the fallacies, right, one after another, and it was very obvious to me. And it was amazing to me that it wouldn't be obvious, to others.
the
but
viewers,
the viewers, they just don't think that way. But I was noticing them all just going down the list. Okay, there's a straw man. There's an argument. There's an argument by declaration. There is there's a slippery slope, et cetera, et cetera.
But you also notice the effective use of emotional appeals, and you can imagine being a well-meaning, God-fearing evangelical Christian in a church with your fellows, your family, people you love, and your minister says, congregation, we're going to be trained right now to fight against the enemy. You watch this video series, you can imagine how it'd light fire under your tuchus, make you get out there and fight the enemy.
I never realized that. And it's just, again, it's that sort of effective use of the media. Wow, it's amazing. Well, in a minute we'll talk about how CFI is now going to try to counter that. But we're going to take a few more callers here, and we're going to...
You were talking about CFA.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about CFA and sort of... and this again, is one of the many organizations under the umbrella of the Center for Inquiry,
That's a right way to frame it, yeah.
Okay.
Ostensibly, the goals of the university.
Okay.
Free, unfettered inquiry into all fields.
Okay.
Is the goal of the Center for Inquiry and our campus outreach program. Now it's called the Campus Free Thought Alliance. In the spring, look online or other places, you guys can, for Center for Inquiry on campus. We're going to be rebranding it CFI on campus. And Center for Inquiry, its campus outreach program, will be promoting the goals of the university, free, unfettered inquiry into all fields of human endeavor. And especially, to our way of thinking, we'll focus on the sacred cows, the reigning mythologies, paranormal beliefs, supernatural beliefs, the postmodernisms.
Yeah. Now, the Christian right has been inordinately successful and effective in doing a ministry towards not college campuses as well as grade schools, going all the way down, high school, junior highs, and I remember all the way from even fifth grade elementary school. I actually lived overseas until I was like 10 or 12, but I got to do my last year of elementary school in America, and it's the first time I encountered this sort of thing. But I remember groups going
Youth
back to
for Christ,
Young Life was a big one, there was a Fellowship for Christian Athletes, which is a very doctrinaire and very powerful campus organization. And then, of course, there is Campus Crusade for Christ.
InterVarsity Christian Fellowship, then Hillel for conservative Jews, Cardinal Newman Centers for Catholics.
And perhaps maybe you could talk a little bit about what you have seen lately as the successes of these organizations, how they've achieved these successes, how well funded they are, and maybe how a CFI and CFA want to sort of provide this alternative.
Well, there's a lot to talk about there, but it's an underreported story how effective is evangelical Christian campus outreach. Campus Crusade for Christ alone has an annual operating budget approaching $400 million each year for Christian campus outreach.
Man.
Every campus has a CCC chapter, a Campus Crusade chapter. In fact, we work closely with them on a number of campus-wide debates on God's existence, or can you be good without believing in God, or those kinds of questions. Was Jesus the Son of God, or was he a man? Those kinds of questions. That's not the only subject we deal with. We also talk about and engage in public education campaigns regarding the paranormal, fringe science, and fringe medicine.
Right.
There are a lot of movements out there on the campuses. There was a study out a year and a half ago by, I believe, one of the Pew charitable trusts, one of the Pew organizations, that said you can go through all 4 years of college and never once have a meaningful debate or dialogue with someone who believes unlike you.
So that's crazy to me. That's just.
So if you're an evangelical Christian, you hang out with your evangelical Christians.
Yeah.
And
I've noticed that does kind of go past the campus experience for them too, because if you look at, a Christian culture has now sort of become this alternative to the mainstream, where there are Christian coffee houses and Christian bookstores and Christian video stores.
There's a whole Christian product line of everything Christian.
And
they have the phone book that's Christian. The Christian phone book.
There's a
it's
Christian
all
Yellow Pages
businesses that are just Christian.
And it seems like this activity helps to insulate the conservative Christians from any sort of competing point of view.
Right.
And
so they don't have to think about the tough questions.
Yeah. And it is much easier than when you have people who are already sort of living with those memes and in that kind of in this isolated environment that they've selected for themselves. It's very easy instead of being able to present them with an alternative view and then engage them in a debate, they just look to their leaders, guys like Tim LaHaye, and who made this video, who are just going to demonize anyone who's sort of outside the realm, as it were, saying, oh well, these people, they're immoral, and and they just want pure anarchy, and they're out to control the world and do all this kind of crazy Illuminati stuff. And people who aren't getting any other information are going to be, it's very easy to make them receptive to that kind of nonsense.
There's something about the evangelical community that, I'm not a sociologist, but it just seems like there's something about the evangelical community that creates followership, creates a need to be told what to do. You have people like Ralph Reed who know that he has power, and he can command his Christian foot soldiers to do audacious things. One thing that they're very effective at on the campuses is, there's an organization called Summit Ministries out of Colorado Springs, has a summer, let's say a training series for Christian college activists, Christian college students who are Christian activists, training them how to teaching them how to shut down biology classrooms, even tenured professors. I've spoken with tenured biology professors.
What do you mean, like shout them down?
No, well, it's a more devious strategy, because even tenured professors, the last thing they want to do is get a dean on their back or be seen to be advancing an anti-Christian point of view. So even some tenured professors have to pussyfoot around the teaching of evolution, even at major schools, because there's a strategy that students are trained to adopt at Summit Ministries and other places on how to advance their Christian biblical worldview in the schools. We are providing some alternatives, some means by which we are trying to offer a reasoned response. One thing that we're engaged in is each year, we put on each semester 25 to 30 major campus events across the country. So we have debates on secular ethics, on the role of religion in American public life, church-state separation, the paranormal, philosophy and religion, all kinds of issues that you would imagine would be important to us. And we draw crowds of students who, for the first time maybe, are engaging in a line of thought regarding these important issues. Most of the time, they get just the pablum at church that's one message, and it's on message, and it's about the enemy that they have to fight. And
you think there's
so we're offering an alternative.
I want to offer a couple of comments on what you mentioned about followership and this neediness of that. First off, I think that is probably something that is just very easily exploited, because it's already there in the sense of what
Maybe
religion.
It's there biologically in our species.
Well, I think that what makes religion attractive is that it does provide, you have this celestial parent.
Right.
You have it's the father figure who is
the dad in the sky who will make it all work out later.
Yeah.
Someone's mean to you, don't worry, he'll get his whipping later.
Yeah.
You can get your candy, later.
It is just this. It's just an offshoot of when you growing up with your two parents, and then you become an adult, you don't have your parents anymore.
Right.
But there is still something atavistic about this need to have this being cared for need. And so I think that is what makes religious beliefs attractive in many ways, although a lot of believers probably wouldn't think of it in strictly that way. There is something to Isaac Asimov when he identified religion as a thumb to suck and a skirt to hold. It's something. It's the thing that kind of infantilizes.
Right.
And people find that it's a security blanket, very comforting. But my second thought just kind of flew away.
We were just talking about some of the things we do on the campuses.
Right.
So we have a public lecture and debate series. The most exciting thing that we're making available right now is that students who are of our philosophical, our scientific outlook, can go to our website, www.campusfreethought.org.
Okay.
They join the Campus Free Thought Alliance. It's free to join. They get in the mail educational and promotional resources, so they can kind of offer an alternative voice on their campus. They get copies of the magazines and organizing guides, some brochures, flyers, posters.
So they understand what all the bullet points are and what to discuss and how to...
Yeah, not necessarily that they get talking points, but that they begin an education in an alternative view. And if there's a student out there on a campus and he goes to, or she goes to the website and they look around, they say, wow, there are 80 Christian groups on my campus. There's not one free thought, not one secular, not one skeptic group. Well, they fill out the online form. They get a box in the mail with all kinds of, we call it turnkey materials. Turnkey meaning if you want a campus Free Thought Alliance group on your campus, it's as easy as getting in the car and putting in the key into the ignition, turning, and you got a group up and running. Because, you know, we've been at this 6, 7, 8 years. That you just do step 1, 2, 3. We have a lot of faculty support. So if there's a student on a campus who wants to start a CFA group, they join as a prospective group. We put them in touch with faculty members on their campus, and then there's a voice on their campus contra the religious political extremists.
And then you can actually have this environment of you know, free
unfettered debate.
Yeah, free thought and unfettered debate, and it's not just all, you know, one meme constantly being promoted and pushed. You know, what's interesting to me, and we're going to go ahead and take our last few callers in the last 10 minutes. We've got some new callers lined up, so just hold. But I've noticed a couple of fascinating things, and that is that you know, we tend to think of it. We always notice among the Christian right that what's fascinating is that America, in terms of just the question of religiosity in America, you know, this is a very, you know, one of the most religious nations of all the developed nations, right? We have more churches per capita than any developed nation in the world. You know, it's people here are very, very open, as you ought to be able to be in a free society, about your faith. And yet, when you run into these legal challenges like Ten Commandments monuments or prayer in schools, or, you know, should creationism be taught as well as evolution, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, you will constantly hear people on the Christian right characterizing themselves as this oppressed minority.
Right.
You know,
they use that language a lot.
They're all out to get us, and, you know, we have to fight for, we have to take America back.
Yeah.
It's like, let me see, you've got like a far right-wing, you know, evangelical Christian president, you know, who got like plopped into office by the Supreme Court.
Pat Roberts and others have actually said it's the last oppressed minority in America.
Which is paradox, which is crazy.
I've heard atheist leaders say the same thing about atheism.
Yeah.
I think neither are really oppressed minorities. There's unfairness. I think there's even unfairness to Christians in some communities. So there are, you know, the ACLU has defended Pat Robertson at times and others.
But you know, I think in the case of atheists, you can point to certain areas of you know, where oppression,
unfairness. Yeah.
Well, it's, you know,
bigotry,
if you are a declared atheist in this country, you can't really be elected to public office.
Right.
Not just because it's bad in the press, but I mean, you can't. I mean, you physically aren't allowed to run by law.
Right.
If you don't have like a belief in a supreme being or higher power.
That's
I consider
definitely
that
something that needs to be changed.
And I think that's a little more than unfair. I think that is actually sort of sort of a society, you know, sociological oppression thing. But you're right. Overall, I mean, it's, you know, oppression is, you know, like, you know, that's what the African Americans went through.
Right.
So it's different, but there is certainly disparity and an imbalance.
Right.
And
well,
another
a
thing,
Buddhist couldn't be elected either to higher office, nor could a communist, or, you know. So minority opinions are unpopular minority opinions need to be advanced through public education, but not necessarily through a civil rights movement. Maybe that's another discussion.
Yeah. But you know, I did think recently, though, that there may be, to a certain degree, something to these Christian claims of, oh, we're being picked on, because I think a recent survey was taken in which, you know, different groups of people, you know, people were polled over, what are your opinion of, like, these guys and those guys, you know, like lawyers and at the bottom of the rung, like below prostitutes, were evangelical Christians.
Right.
And
they need a PR campaign, don't they?
But it was specifically evangelical Christians, right? It's not your, you know, you
run-of-the-mill Christians.
Run of your, you know, everyday guy, right? I mean, it's certainly, I mean, the people I think answering this poll are thinking of the Falwells of the world when they say this. And also Marvin Olasky, who is a professor here at UT and in with the Bush administration, religious right, who coined the term compassionate conservatism, which I love, because it seemed to me that was pretty much a concession that compassion is not ordinarily known as a hallmark of conservatism. But you know, he says that at the beginning of every semester in one of these classes, he passes out like this like listing all these different religions and what do the students think, and usually they give the lesser religions like are the less popular ones in America like Islam, but just they don't really know enough to say anything, or they give some misinformation, or they spout some cliche that they've heard. But he says most of them, when it comes to Christian, it's this long list of negatives. It's like, they're arrogant.
They're
they want
intolerant,
to shove their religion down everyone's throats and what have you. But I gotta say, I think that it is because of the very real actions of Christian Coalition and men like Robertson and Falwell, and LaHaye and his bunch and everything, and now you have Roy Moore. I think that it shouldn't be a surprise. I mean, these reactions that people are having, I think, are because most people have this idea that you can believe what you want, but if you try to impose it on me, as opposed to let's have this free atmosphere of exchanging ideas. If you want to impose it on me, that's wrong.
Religious political extremism is un-American, and Americans look at it and it's somehow distasteful. It's off-putting. You're right.
We're going to go and take one more caller. We're sorry.